Let's do it, people. It's
Mhm.
episode 119 of Be Yourself and Love It podcast. I'm here with a dear friend, and we are going to be unashamedly ourselves and love the hell out of it. So I hope you'll do some of that with me. Uh, my friend Ian Powell, we've been together in the digital space for well over 10 years, but he did go into a hiatus, and the world of social media much suffered from his absence. um, and freedom of speech is not freedom of reach, and it's easy to lose your reach when you disappear from social media. But I think Facebook's a dying beast, unfortunately, which is a shame because that was a good source of clients for me.
Hmm.
Um,
And that's where we met, and that was 14 years ago. Because
wow,
it was
geez,
in
Louise.
the run up to 2012 that I remember really connecting with you. And
Yeah, and we've been we reunited our friendship not that long ago, although we occasionally messaged, and I got to come down to the south of England and stay with your wife and your lovely kids, the little monsters. And we had a lot of fun. And the more we spoke, the more we've kind of realized that there's certain topics that have come across our plate that we both had musings on and perspectives. And I wanted to join forces to create a show the likes of which has never been seen before and may never be seen again. And the jumping off topic is what I call the failure of the new enlightenment, or the failure of the digital enlightenment. Because what happened was I came into YouTube maybe about 2007, 2008 as a sort of left of center. I believed in a market economy, but lots of regulation, probably not a big swelling public sector. But I thought, it was all about getting the policies right, and had been studying economics from a kind of leftish, greenish perspective. And I wanted to get in there and share my ideas. But something unthinkable happened, and my YouTube channel was gate crashed by libertarians. And and then Ron Paul jumped on the scene in 2008, and he was really impressive, the first right winger I knew that was against war. And there was this swelling of, and like after a year or two of battling against it, I was with on YouTube, in comments. I was converted, but it wasn't just that, right? We came onto this fertile new soil, YouTube, and we had exposure to the best ideas in the world, not just like about libertarian politics, but it was like there was people promoting books like How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk and Summerhill. And I thought, wow, like Stefan Molyneux, the key. I've always thought I'd already thought that the key to shaping the future was to sort out the way we bring up children. That's probably how I ended up becoming a therapist, through trying to figure out my own childhood. There's people talking about education reform, people talking about how to heal, personal healing. That was a journey that took a lot longer than I was promised. Prison reform, criminal justice, restorative justice, changing the schools. And we thought, oh yeah, nonviolent communication. I want to talk about that with you and the role that that's played in your life. And we kind of thought that we were in the beginning of a new renaissance, the next enlightenment. What was going to happen was people were going to get into all of this stuff because good ideas because they were so interesting and compelling, and they were so true and good. And I thought we were just in the cutting edge of the blade, but it turns out that people actually preferred cat videos. And I know I'm dominating a bit in grandstanding, but just one more point on that. Prior to the internet, throughout all history, it was appropriate and credible for activists and social reformers to believe that the reason why society was kind of shite or had its shortcomings was because people didn't have enough information. And what we've seen over the last whatever 15 or more years is all the best ideas in the world are out there, but people do not thank you for putting those ideas in front of them. In fact, they hate you, demonize you, call you names. I don't know how long I had to debate on Facebook, maybe 6, 8 years before I got it through my thick skull that if you bring people enough evidence and reason, they don't change their minds because they prefer to believe what they prefer to believe more than they like the truth. And with that comes a certain degree of disillusionment. And that's what I call the failure of the new Enlightenment. I should love to write a book called that one day. But, you know,
yeah, so I very much echo the sentiment that you have, which I feel in a way a bit sad that that's our jumping off point, because there's some shared grieving, I think, that brings us together. It's like a mourning of what could have been, and
yes,
I think that that's it's interesting. People suggest that actually grieving unfulfilled dreams is just as important as grieving the loss of a loved one or something, because you know it's something that we were really entwined with. It's something that we really wanted and imagined was going to manifest, and when it doesn't, there's a loss there that is worth recognition. And there's no doubt that I remember at that time of interacting with you across Facebook and getting caught in debates, and the reason I was attracted to you is you were very energetic.
Oh, darling.
Well, even though all I got to see was this tiny little glyph attached to your name, you know, that avatar, the energy and the vitality of your discussions was just great and vivifying. And it was amazing how much one could get a sense of someone just via these conversations, these dialogues that were taking place.
It was a wonderful period in that way. Facebook was really, really good back then. You got involved in groups, such interesting discussions, people bringing information, actually trying to help each other and stuff like that. It was, we didn't even know we was born. You know, one thing I regret is I was so perfectionist back then. I wish I'd done hundreds of interviews. I didn't really get the format. The format was to think out loud and think imperfectly. And then once you've thought in public and people have commented on it and you've thought about it, you've said the same thing 4 or 5 times in 4 or 5 different videos. That's not something I thought I should be doing. I wanted every video to be like a gold nugget. I didn't realize that wasn't the format. What you needed was throughput, put stuff out regularly. And that was the golden age because YouTube was very democratic before Google bought it over. In other words, you could go far just on the strength of content back then. Now it's the winner takes all. They accelerate reach to people who've already got a following and are going to make them advertising revenue. But when you first got on Facebook, you could make friends with people. And if you liked a video, you could send it to all your friends with one click. Now, then they reduced it to 100. And then you could only do 25 at a shot. So you needed to do 4 groups of 25. And then they moved the sidebar to under the video. And at the time, people said that's because they wanted the video to be the star, so to speak, rather than the presenter to be the star, because that's their advertising model. I don't know if that's true or not. So it became this more faceless thing. Back then, you know, if you send a video to all your friends and some people thought, wow, this is really good. And they sent it to their friends and, you know, and people, you could get a viral video. But the key was to keep on putting your ideas out there and get feedback from people and then continue the conversation. You could do video responses. You could respond to other people's videos. So really, really good conversations were happening on YouTube, and they were happening horizontally, not like it is now, with which I admit is an improvement over when it was just 4 channels on the telly. But Joe Rogan, or something, and people like that are essentially setting the entire dialogue for who's a star, who's a star of alternative information. It's who's on Joe Rogan. Do you know what I mean? And Tim Pool, whatever the big podcasts of the day are. So and those are good shows. Well, I'm not such a fan of Tim Pool, but well, I don't want to say that though, because I want to go on his show one day. So here, anyway. What I mean is, so this is why it kind of jibes. I think the new Enlightenment is right, because the Enlightenment was, the move from monarchy to democracy. So it was kind of like a move from monarchy to democracy in the conversation. Over to you.
I couldn't believe it at the time. The sense of suddenly being in a classroom in my house where I could create this school with the finest teachers that always seemed out of my reach. I mean, the content that you were creating at that time, you were interviewing people like Pete Gerlach, other pioneers in the world of relationships, with healthy relationships and healthy communication, and talking about nonviolent communication and such like. And I remember the first time that I had a smartphone and a decent laptop. It was about the same time. I was running a nursery at that time in Brighton and doing community events. And that's when I was thinking about, I was hoping I was going to meet you by getting you to come down and sessions in Brighton, but it never transpired. And at that time, it just felt incredible. I could sit there and listen to the voices of people, not even necessarily alive that day. I listened to hundreds of hours of Alan Watts before there were adverts and music put in the background of everything. I could sit at the feet of Carl Jung and have him talk about, in his own voice, about the workings of the mind. I learned so much about history, about the law. That period of time allowed me to encounter people who had a deep understanding of the law from the United States, from the UK, reaching back through time. And all of this happening without adverts, without interruptions. I mean, watching YouTube today, it seems like so many videos. It's gone to the state that I think American TV was at 20 years ago, 20, 30
You need to install an ad blocker.
That may well be the case, but then there wasn't a necessity to. So there was so much incredible information, and I was thirsty for it, thinking that I could spend the evening listening to great teachers, live or dead, talking about things that I knew could make my life better. I imagined, like you, that there was this incredible enlightenment about to take place, that the Renaissance that was made possible in the 16 and 1700s was now truly being democratized, a bit like where Luther took the Bible out of and made it into a freely accessible thing through the printing press. Here we were taking the knowledge of humanity spread over the last few hundred years and placing it directly into people's living rooms. It's just such an incredible thing. So I really hoped, no, it wasn't even so much hoped, I just felt that we were on the cusp of great change. There was, people talking about the immediate advent of the end of the Mayan calendar, 2012. I must admit, I got swept up in that. I did get the sense that there was great change afoot. And I remember feeling incredibly disillusioned after 2012. Nothing enormous has changed that I can perceive yet. And then since that time, there just has been this general decline in the quality of conversation that we could have through social media. and an increasing sense that, yeah, like you say, no matter what information one was trying to present to the world, there was so little engagement
Right.
that I definitely had to wrestle some disillusionment over the
Mm-hmm.
years.
And it's like everyone's in their little silo now, and it's hard to break out of it, you know, and feel what's going on out there. And, you know,
Or in here.
yeah, I'm not sure. I was so I guess COVID changed a lot as well. First of all, when Obama came to power, the anti-war movement completely disappeared. So that was part of the disillusionment, which was, oh, under Bush, it was like people are waking up. They're against the surveillance state. They're against the war. So we had reason to think people were waking up, but actually it turned out a lot of them were just anti-Republican, and those were good issues for them to take up. Then I guess there was a big swelling of sort of libertarian thought up until 2015. And, you know, basically, I know a lot of people heroize him, but Trump basically diverted all of that energy back into the political system. So that's like, you know, I just don't buy the idea that Trump is anti-establishment. Oh, but the media's against him. Yeah, big deal. And also when you go to see the cinema, you know, Darth Vader is a villain, and they like to have heroes and villains. So the fact that the media is against Trump is just part of the show. You know, when you go to the pantomime, everyone goes boo, hiss, and people are so gullible, they don't even see through the fact that there is such a thing as, you know, like the elite are not that fucking stupid, right? You know, they need to energize people by giving them people to hate. And, you know,
Which is
after
very
he,
Orwellian.
yeah, and after he, you know, passed the biggest budget in history twice in a row, after saying he was going to cut the size of government and stuff like that, and these people are still licking his butt, thinking he's going to save them. Do you know what? I hope I'm wrong. I hope he is, you know, the second, you know, I hope he is appointed by God to save us. But I mean, it doesn't look bloody likely. So, you know, when he bombed Syria, when he sold weapons, the day he sold weapons to the Saudis, I was actually proper depressed about that. Just, you know, the disillusionment, even though I didn't really buy into the hype anyway, but, you know, you still kind of hope. So there's been these series of events. COVID was the kind of death knell in some way, because it really was the moving into the dark ages, because it's not the same world. Before COVID, they weren't censoring videos on YouTube with impunity left and right. Now you can get banned for all sorts of stuff. People got banned on YouTube for saying true facts.
Doctors
Yeah,
and
experts.
qualified people with all the credentials to be able to make the statements they were making were being disappeared.
Right. So it's not the same world. Even though we're out of lockdown, you can't just go on YouTube and say what you want. So that brings it to a close, really. And so, you
Well,
know,
and I think there's so much more to say there, because not only so a figure that I thought was so at the time of COVID, there was the famous PCR test, and
right.
not everybody, but many people were basing their choices to go to work, to see their families at Christmas, on this PCR test invented by a guy who you could hear speaking in his own voice about the nature of that test, how it's created, what it was good for, and what it wasn't good for. And Carrie Mullis, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, you know, I remember sharing videos to that and having so little uptake. It was so
Yeah.
interesting to see that nobody seemed to care what the person who invented this process had to say about the PCR test, and that he was saying it was being used in a completely irresponsible manner.
Right.
It was never
Yeah.
designed for doing what it was, how it was being
Yeah.
utilized. And then for me, the thing that really, I mean, I found crushing at that time was not just people's unwillingness to look at a video that might take them 10 minutes to see from the original source about something that could change their lives. It was the fact that there was such outright condemnation. Like, who are you to question this? Who are you
Yeah,
to
I know.
ask any questions? Like, being absolutely hammered publicly
Right.
for daring to have the indignation to say, oh, well, what about this?
Yeah. It was the absolute peak of people preferring to believe what they prefer to believe and being completely immune to evidence. I mean, I thought it was bad enough trying to convince people that the minimum wage destroys jobs. It's like, right, you acknowledge that putting a tax on that the government puts a tax on alcohol to increase the price so people buy it less, right? So why wouldn't you increasing the price of labor make there less demand for labor? Idiots, right? Or but people don't want to believe that because I'm for the worker, I'm the good guy. And COVID was peak because for decades and decades and decades we believed that people on the left were radicals and against this, and they were the rebels and anti-establishment, and they were the most virulent supporters of the regime. um you know and yeah, I can see why you can bribe people to stay at home, and this idea of, it was the peak of this idea of what my peers think is more important than the truth. So this was the death of reason, it was the death of the Enlightenment, it was the death of free speech. So I mean, just like a quick inventory of, like, so there's all this stuff, this amazing parent stuff on peaceful parenting coming out, and this was going to help people parent better. But it's people who are into it need it the least. Although then there's all this information on communicating, as we said, nonviolent communication. That's a book that had an influence on both of our lives. You ran a group. This is an amazing tool to help you navigate conflicts in your relationships. And it led to me becoming a therapist. When I read chapter 7 of nonviolent communication, called Receiving Empathically, and I started practicing those techniques, that changed my whole life, because I saw that I knew what I needed to do when someone around me got emotional. I knew how to listen and be there for them properly. And it was so rewarding that when my degree finished, it was like, okay, well, I'll do my postgrad studies in counseling. This is fulfilling. There's all the stuff on healthcare reform, natural health. Things on natural health are getting absolutely destroyed on the social media now. I mean, stuff that you think shouldn't even be controversial, but they're absolutely going for it. I know a guy, he does a great Instagram, Cultivate Elevate. So many videos get taken down or blacklisted or whatever. It's
What's
so
he
weird.
talking about?
Just bringing back the old ways of healing, and anything from superfoods to the right metals to use, electroculture, how to grow more food in your garden using principles that are long forgotten. So there's that. So we thought we were going to, and then there, as I mentioned, the kind of criminal justice reform angle, because we spend so much money locking people up, and it doesn't really do any good for them, or it doesn't make them any better. Sometimes it does. Sometimes people get a boot in the balls, and so there's this idea that you could some people do. They get a boot in the balls, and
I just
they
love
pull up their socks.
the Glaswegian boot in the balls.
Yeah,
There's
boot
no
in the balls.
translation for that.
Yeah, there isn't. But for the main part, so
Adding to your inventory there, like, yes, it was like there was a psychedelic renaissance that meant that, wow, you could meet yourself in a way that you never could before.
Right.
You could learn about communication, which had the potential to transform all of your relationships. You could learn about the impact of family life and therefore radically affect the way and improve the way that you related to your own family and to your own children, and therefore preventing this cycle of ongoing, there was the potential for financial liberation, because people were sharing information about the fraudulent nature of mortgages.
Right.
I
Right.
remember trying to tell people, hey, like your mortgage is, you know, people have shown this through case law that it's based on a fraud. Same with credit cards and all sorts of financial instruments that are just not right. We could be, I thought at that time, wow, we're going to radically transform the way that we do
Mm.
business and we engage in commerce with each other. The cryptocurrency thing presented at one point the opportunity to do away with all third parties. No more banks, no more financial institutions able to
Right.
intervene and profiteer as by acting as these intermediaries. And even Bitcoin, that started out as
Yeah.
this unbelievable tool for freedom, was infiltrated and has been made into something which is mediated through the Lightning network and
Mhm.
other and through the exchanges and such like.
Mhm.
So there was also the financial aspect, the legal aspect, the information that was being disseminated online about the nature of law and how that differs from legalese and the way
Mhm.
the magistrate system and the courts that affect people's lives in very real ways was being exposed. There was all the stuff to do with men's work and women's work,
Yeah. Oh,
what it
yeah.
is to
That's
be
another
masculine
one.
and what it is to be feminine. There was all this incredible information about sexuality that was appearing. I mean, who doesn't want to have a better sex life? I thought sharing material on that kind of level would be just, you know, who would not be interested? And yet again, that was another thing that just seems to have completely, it seems to me that we find ourselves with exactly the same banking institutions, dependence on the same money,
Mhm.
even more reinforced in the idea that governments can pass laws that suddenly and completely radically change your life.
And
We,
people want them. That's the thing. People say, "Yeah, it's good," and they should be able to
yeah,
coerce you.
yeah. So it
They want
seems,
more of them.
so after all of this information suddenly being like there for the taking, and this incredible opportunity for transforming our reality, and you know, I'm not going to say that that hasn't been happening in the background, but it just,
Mhm. I
for me,
agree. It
didn't
has to some
happen.
degree.
It didn't happen with the uptake, and you
Yeah,
know, there was a potential for a giant
I know.
wave.
The
And that we,
same way that it went from, very few people had computers, to everyone having a laptop. You'd share one computer in the house if you were lucky between the whole family, and now everyone. I thought it was going to be like that. I thought that you can't stop a good idea, and when people saw the effectiveness of this, then it would spread. But you know, I don't know what it is. Not everyone's that flexible in their mind. And yeah, I guess I don't know. Yeah, as
well, I suppose through our
I
work
don't really
in,
understand it.
I
Yeah.
mean, I suppose through our work in therapy and that those kind of areas, I've certainly in my own struggles, specifically reflected back to me as a
Mhm.
parent and as a partner.
Mhm.
I've come to see how hard it is to change,
Mhm.
even
Yeah, I
with
know.
all
I
the
agree.
conscious will in the world,
Yeah.
even trying with all my might to be this personification of what I imagine I can
Mhm.
be.
I think that's part of it for me as well.
I'm still dragged back to doing these reflexive behaviors that I've learned at a very early point in my life that are not so trivial to just undo and leave behind. So, I can understand that people have got
Absolutely.
a very intuitive resistance to anyone who tells them, "Oh, you can change, you can be a different person," you can, because that sort of trajectory is not necessarily easy.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Boy, back then I thought by now I'd have a dozen books out, and I felt like I'd be, way more healed than I am. I think that I've done a lot of work on myself, and it's easy to take for granted what's changed. When I think of myself 10 years ago, I was definitely a whole load more anxious that I am now. For example, my communication skills weren't as good. I have improved in various ways, but I thought I'd maybe be like levitating above a cushion by this point, and
And that's one
I
of the frustrating things about bumping into people from the past as well, is that we can think that we're doing so much personal work and
Mhm.
changing so much, and yet you can see someone you haven't seen for 30 years and they go, you haven't changed at all, you're exactly the same
Well, I
person.
hope, yeah, I'm like, I hope not, That's not a compliment, mate. It may have been intended as a compliment, like, "Oh, it's nice to see you again. You're so familiar." But,
I mean, that's
you know
maybe something about character. It doesn't necessarily mean that the content of our days
I know,
unfolds in the same way that it used to. Um,
right.
and
W
when I think about we were
Yeah.
thinking to talk about nonviolent communication a little bit. I mean, I've always had I've always enjoyed languages, and I learned sign language at one point in my life, and I learned French really well. I lived abroad in France and became completely fluent there. And when I learned nonviolent communication, or attempted to, um, I I kind of realized how fundamental this was, because it's trying to rewrite the way in which we think,
Mhm.
um, to think in more compassionate, less judgmental ways. And it's not an easy thing. I spent 3 years in a focused group working at it really hard. And as I
Yeah,
look back, I
that's
kind
a
of think,
lot.
how well did we get on?
Mhm, mm.
Did it really? Did we see the rewards for the efforts that we put in at that time?
Right, well, I mean, I definitely have I mean, well, I don't yeah. I thought like, I my communication skills were going a long way because I have a pretty harmonious relationship. But then I had a relationship with someone who pissed me off, and old ways of communicating um, came out
Quickly resurfaced.
came out. So it might just be that my partner's pretty easy to get on with. Um,
Mm.
so
I like to
I
think that that's possibly because we're making better choices
I
today.
definitely well,
because
I
because
mean,
it's more easy, it's easier to recognize the kind of communication traits that must be avoided.
right.
Nowadays, if I find myself meeting someone who spends their time going, you
Mhm.
think this, you think that,
Yeah,
I'm very
it's a red
wary.
flag.
I feel hesitant, because I realize how quickly I'm getting caught up in their projections, and they're laying trips on me. So I think,
Mm.
it was still a healthy process. It helped me to be aware of what things I needed to avoid in order to
I
have a
think
healthy relationship.
this idea of the enemy image from nonviolent communication is very profound because it's so true. Like when you get angry at someone or you see them as you're basically and you see it come out on Facebook as well. It's like, why must people be wrong on the internet? But what happens is like you've got this impulse, like you're the cause of all the pain and suffering in the universe. It's all your fault. And when you get triggered in relationships, you feel justified in mistreating the other person because um, you have this enemy image of them. But that is, of course, to use the proverb, shitting where you eat, so to speak, because when you're in a relationship, you're in a system. So you can't get away with um, downloading your toxic emotions into the other person because you're peeing in the same pool that you're swimming in. So you used to call. I've got a couple of other table topics for today, and they are related to what we're talking about. So you used to call yourself. Told me a salesman for a better world, and I
Mm.
think that's what I got onto YouTube to herald the new enlightenment, and share ideas to change the world.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and why do you no longer see yourself as a salesman for a better world?
The short answer is because that is attaching to the idea that it's attached to a future outcome rather than being present.
Right.
Firstly, I'm a salesman that can't follow through on my sales pitch. I can't.
Right.
I can maybe, you know, I thought I could point to a better world that was out there and was attainable, but the thing is, I can't follow through on that. That requires, you know, a mass adoption of these ideas in order to experience that better world. And I think a lot of things that a lot of thoughts that I had that plagued me at that time was, oh, if everybody knew about financial freedom,
Oh,
we'd be
that's
happy.
it.
If
That's it.
if everybody had better communication
That's
skills,
it. That's
if
it.
everybody had, and so it's this very utopian mindset.
Right.
If
The
everybody
activism
does what I
mentality.
think,
Exactly.
then we will have a wonderful world.
Exactly. And you're putting it into the future, you know, someday, you know, when
and
everyone adopts this.
Maybe I needed to be disabused of those illusions.
Exactly.
Of thinking that everybody had to think in the way that I did. That everybody had to adopt and be interested and curious in these things that I did. So I couldn't follow through on these sales. I didn't know if a better world even was attainable, because there was no guarantee that I could present that product would ever manifest. And I suppose this then led to, and the way in which I've been disabused of that way of thinking is to get out of the idea of hopefulness.
Right. Yeah. That was the next topic.
Because I've always seen myself as very optimistic and hopeful. That's always the way people have recounted to me. And now I've looked at my own stuff. I think that this probably emanated from me smiling at mummy and daddy and wanting to make them happy, and smiling at other people, and then therefore attaching to this idea that when I smile, the world smiles with me. And so my character is drunk in this idea that I need to be positive and optimistic and everything's great. And hey, look, there's this better world that's out there.
Yeah.
Now, that's not completely misinformed. There was an amazing talk I saw in that run up to 2012, delivered by someone talking about the idea of paradigm shift.
All right.
And how when we, during the Enlightenment, when people realized that the Earth wasn't just spinning around, first of all, we realized that the world didn't have all of the other stars and planets spinning around it. And that new scientific model soon translated in a different way to how we think about ourselves. Then we had the heliocentric model, where everything was spinning around the sun. That also shifted over the course of many decades, and that new paradigm in scientific thinking and astronomy quickly translated itself into a new way of thinking for people, the way we saw ourselves in life and the universe. And then when we finally realized this helical model of the universe, that the solar system is like a spiral that's spinning around these other bodies that are also forming spirals in space, that new scientific understanding was also going to lead to a shift in the way that people thought about themselves in the universe. So when I saw that laid out before me, it was like, okay, no, there is a new paradigm that's coming. You know, people are going to shift the way they think as we're unfolding and packaging more and more stuff about science and about the way that we understand the world. So there is kind of a new world coming. There is a paradigm shift that's occurring, but it's probably something that's going to take decades, if not centuries, to unfold. And I suppose I had an impatience that it was just round the corner, that it was just going to happen overnight. And so now what I'm learning is that I need to be less hopeful and not fall into hopelessness, but to try and be hope-free, to just be present to what is right now and apply myself.
Yeah, there's so many things you've said that are so fantastic there, and a real jumping off point for me. It's interesting that you use the term paradigm shift, because one of the videos I watched that's still there on YouTube was called The New Paradigm in Business. And he was going on about 10 ways where businesses were going to change because they were too big now to run the old authoritarian top-down model. And he had 10, and he'd go into businesses and make them basically more, let's say, decentralized. I want to use the word democratic, but now democratic is a dirty word because the people don't know shit. So I don't want them to rule over me. Decentralized is better because it still retains a competence hierarchy. In other words, in your areas of competency, we defer to you, and in my areas of competency, we defer to me. So I think another reason why calling this the failure of the new Enlightenment or the failure of the digital Enlightenment was exactly the fact that the Enlightenment principle, the principle of liberalism as it used to be, real liberalism, not what's called liberalism today, was, well, I mean, people can reason, therefore they can participate in government because we can discuss and we can correct our errors. And what we've discovered is people don't correct their errors.
Well,
So,
after 100 years of education,
yeah.
they've lost that capacity.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. So the idea was, see if you're an engineer or a painter or whatever, you need to meet, or an architect, you need to meet reality. If your bridge does not, adhere to the laws of physics, it will not stand and you will lose your job. In the realm of ideas, which is, by the way, why the social conditioning against the working class was, they're bigots, they're racist, they're this, they're that, small-minded, low information voters, blah, 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 blah. Low information voters meet with reality in their jobs all day. And if they don't do a good job, they will lose their job. Whereas intellectuals can spew out bullshit all day long and all night, and they can get a raise at the end of it. Public servants can do a terrible job and say, oh, we just didn't have enough money, and get rewarded with more money. So they don't meet reality. This is the idea of the scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. He represented, the farmer, the working people, who were told he doesn't have any diploma. They were told they don't have brains, but in the end, they do have brains. They've got the wisdom of working the land, the wisdom of meeting reality every day, unlike the person who has a diploma who's nothing but hot air. So we thought, because I think what you were saying with the new paradigm shift is because the information is there. When people got into an argument, they said, they'd say, let's Google it, let's look on YouTube, let's find out what the truth is, and they'd correct their errors. On the point, do you want to come back? I'm going to do hope soon, but if you've got something to come back on, I don't want to grandstand. Well, maybe I do. It is my nature. I feel like I've got so much to say on these topics. So hope is a big one for me. And one thing I remembered was in one of his videos, someone said, went back when he was good, pre-2013, Stefan Molyneux. I don't know, maybe he's doing good stuff now, but I don't know. I don't follow him. Someone said, how are you so productive and stuff like that? And he said, I tell you the secret, I have no hope. And that sounds very disillusioning, but what he meant was there is no fate but what we make. So I'm out here every day putting these videos out to do the best I can because that's the best I can. I'm not relying on hope. I don't have hope that anything will change. Therefore, it's my responsibility. It's our responsibility to do the best we can. So, well, it sounds bad to say to live without hope. What hope did was create our disillusionment at the best laid plans of mice and men. Our dreams did not come to fruition. And I totally 100% endorse and get what you said with what I call the activism mindset. It used to be, before YouTube, it used to be, well, if we could just convert everyone to socialism, then society will be good. Now it's like, oh, if we could just get everyone to learn NVC and raise their children right, if we could just get everyone to see that the drug war causes more harm than good, if we could just get to see that there was no, if we could just convince everyone that the war in Iraq was unjustified back in 2003 for some reason that was really hard to do, then the world will be good. But actually, I think it's the other way. What you have to do is you get really good at NVC, and you have an impact on the people around you. You get really good at raising your children. You live the principles of live and let live in your life, and you spread, and you become competent. You use your competency to help yourself and others, and then you teach other people the same competency. And that's one of the ways I feel like we've been so enslaved, is they took all of the salt of the earth work out of school and they replaced it with academia, even for people who are not academically inclined, which is stupid. And the reason for that is conspiracy theory time. Like I said to you, if you're an architect or an electrician or a plumber, you meet reality. And when you meet reality, you learn, if I have the right ideas in my head, I can do my job. And if I have the wrong ideas in my head, I can't do my job. It doesn't work, which is why regular people are skeptical of philosophy and armchair reasoning. When they took all of that stuff out of the schools, home economics, shop, as they call it in the USA. Well, I don't know what we call it here, carpentry or whatever.
Design, technology, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Anything that's hands-on, even playing darts, even learning to salsa dance, anything you do where it's not other people who are the authority, but it's the facts of reality that are the authority, trains your mind in a certain way. And they take all of that out of the school, and what we're left is what happens with COVID, which is there's no right answers, there's no wrong answers, there's only authority. Nathaniel Branden called it social metaphysics, and it was an amazing concept. It's the idea that I can train myself that reality is not objective, it's not based on facts, but reality is what my peer group thinks. That's so the truth is, so that's social we get our sense of reality from whether we're with the herd or not. So why should the case against hope? You're projecting into the future. Go on.
Yeah, you're attaching to an outcome that is absolutely unpredictable. It leads to this oscillation between hopefulness and hopelessness, which I myself have suffered from in this kind of failure of the new enlightenment or the digital enlightenment, as we're talking about it. There's the crestfallen nature of, things are just carrying on the way. It didn't work out the way I thought. And that then has meant not being present to what is. There's been dealing with all these writhing emotions and not being a functioning, strong person in the world.
Right. Yes, and it's time to get back to the salt of the earth and my mistake was to go online and try and find my fortune out there, not rather than I'm not saying that I shouldn't have done that, but it should have gone the other way. I should have been practicing more in institutions in 3D worlds. That's where you integrate your expertise. Like when I was doing my degree, I got to do a placement as a classroom assistant. So I got to practice all the peaceful parenting stuff in a school. And then after that, it's not just something that I read in a book that I thought sounded like a good idea. I knew for a fact that these approaches really work with children. And, I impressed the teachers. They put me with the most difficult children because I had the skills to deal with them. They wouldn't do that for just any. So by doing that, you gain the expertise. I have some luck as a therapist. It just means that I get to work with more people on solving more problems. So I get to learn from more people's experience. And I like to think that I've gained some wisdom in this life. But yeah, I if I could go back, I would have done more. And I would have done more volunteering, get more go into organizations in any ways I can to practice these skills, and then come to YouTube to report to the public, the general public, what I'd learned from putting the pedal to the metal, so to speak. So hope, you're projecting into the future. It's a way of escaping unpleasant emotions and frustrations. You're putting the onus on outside things. Really, you just need to look at the 10 feet in front of you, and every occasionally look at the peak of the mountain, and then back to the steps in front of you. If you keep on looking at the peak of the mountain, you'll just trip over your shoelaces.
I mean, a way I heard it being described, which I really like, is that hope is the crack cocaine of our generation.
I love
that
it.
People are literally like,
Yeah.
you know, smoking as much of that stuff as they can, one
It's
hit
an
after
opiate.
the other, because it's like, oh my God, I feel so hopeless. I need a bit more hope. And that then floats the boat for a little while until it's then crushed by the interface with reality. Then comes the hopelessness, then another blast. God, I can build myself up with a good inhale of hope. And so that just leads to a situation that never improves itself. It just, you know, we're
like
filling ourselves with an impression of what might be. Like
Karl Marx saying, religion is the opiate of the masses. I think it's hope. Hope is the opiate, because actually, if you connect with yourself, and everyone's experienced it at some times, you go into a flow state, and when you connect with yourself, what you do is inherently rewarding, and so there's no great need for hope. Hope comes in to console yourself. When you console yourself, you create a split in your mind where you're trying to convince yourself not to feel what you're feeling because you don't like it, instead of going into it and digging it up and doing something with it. You know, you like you can leave the room, but it's still in a mess. What you want to do is pick up things one by one and go, this with our emotions. Do I need it? If I need it, how do I contextualize it? I can keep it. If I don't need it, I can throw it away. Hope will prevent you from doing that. So it's a false. A friend of mine made a cartoon once, which he said, it's a woman bringing back a bag of shopping. And I think I'm getting it more or less. She's saying to the shopkeeper, I'm here to return this bag of hopes. When I got them home and opened them up, I found it was full of disappointments. And that's my friend. He wrote Hanos. He's on Amazon. He wrote a book. I wish I could remember what it was called. Hanos. So yeah, my pal. So I met him in Osho Lila around the same time, and I was going down there to a couple of times a year to go to a little festival and meeting interesting people and things like that. So that brings us to our last topic, and it's actually a segue into something I wish we'd mentioned earlier, but it slipped my mind. We want to run an online event for listeners. A lifeboat. So the jumping off point is community, because we talked about hope and how hope can be disillusioning. But another thing we've talked about is the hope of community. Oh, it's happening. I've connected with my people, and something's going to come of this. And then you have such high expectations, and it doesn't pan out. I remember moving to Edinburgh to think, because I thought I was going to be with the best friends I'd ever had in my life. But they didn't give me the same treatment when I lived there as when I was just visiting from Glasgow. And they were getting disillusioned of stuff in their life. And it didn't turn out to be this big social renaissance that I thought it was going to be, although I did meet one of my very dear partners there and lived with her for a long time. So it was good. But we've had these incidents in our life, going to where we did ayahuasca, I just could not get enough of that sweet, sweet community. So tell me about community and the pitfalls of false promises.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's definitely something your experience mirrors mine in many ways. You know, there's another aspect of that hopefulness, I think, meeting a group of
Mhm,
people and thinking, oh, I'm amongst friends now,
mhm,
finally.
finally.
And that's not just in friendship groups, but in businesses and in relationships, in intimate relationships. And you know, that's in that way, I guess that's been a cycle that's been present amongst humanity for a very long time. You know, that seems to be in many ways the story of marriage. We meet someone, we romantically assume that they're just going to be the fulfillment of every
Mhm,
intimate dream that we may ever have, and then, you know, years and years of marriage and family life, you know, disabuses us of what it is that we project onto that person that we
mhm,
romantically fall in love with. um, I I've realized through, especially through nonviolent communication work, that I definitely have a need for community. And I
mhm,
think that the history of humanity demonstrates that we survive better. We're not lone animals, you know, we're very much pack animals. That's how we've lived for tens of thousands of years. We're
mhm,
stronger together than we are alone. In fact, the threat of loneliness is something that I think is behind what I term the cult of normality. It's
mhm,
we've got a very deeply felt resistance and fear of the state of being isolated, because we know that we know intuitively that to be on one's own in the wilderness is a far more dangerous and frightening proposition than being in the wilderness with others. And so I think part of my being drawn to community is that it's like, oh, there's a sense of sanctuary and safety that
mhm,
goes along with finding a group of other people who accept us and share their lives with us. So I've I know that I'm still thirsting for community, and
mhm,
yet I'm also aware of the fact that it's very difficult to really experience meaningful community, because whereas in the past, in the
mhm,
generations that came before us, community was found by a group of very specific
mhm.
shared needs: a shared need for water, for food, for shelter, that and for play and for dance,
And
and that,
defense as well.
yeah, that meant that there was a group of people that were living in close proximity to each other, that were able to meet all these needs in harmony together.
Mhm,
It might not have always been harmonious, but there were these very strong physical needs that brought everyone together. Now we live in these isolated existences where, even if one lives in a city where you've got friends around you, the likeliness is that they live on the other side of town. They're not
right.
just living next door. They're rarely
Mhm,
in the same house. They're rarely in the same building or the same street. And so one can have a sense of affiliation with people, but we don't actually share the same needs with them. The
that's right.
the financial system means that we're all completely isolated from each other. We're just like, it's very rare that I'm producing bread and you're producing meat and we're exchanging those in the way that we used to.
Mhm.
It's now all so atomized
Atomized.
that we don't share the same water supply. We don't have to
Yes.
walk up to the same spring, so therefore we defecate in our water supply because
Right.
it's so divorced from us. And we don't
Yeah.
share the same garden, we don't eat from the same trees, and so therefore it's so much harder to have those things that force us to encounter our problems together. And we very rarely celebrate together.
Mhm,
I mean,
mhm,
the idea of a street party seems so alien to us now. Like, I remember
mm,
when I was very young, the silver jubilee for the Queen happening, and everybody being out in the street,
mhm,
everybody being in the street,
mhm,
even
mhm.
if they were anti-royalists, they would
Yeah,
still be participating in the street party. People knew their neighbours. That doesn't happen now,
right. I
certainly
th
not in the same way.
I think one of the drawbacks of the internet, and believe it or not, I can't believe I'm saying this now because I was such a futurist when I became a libertarian. I was like, yay, progress. I think the jury's out on whether the internet was actually a good or bad thing. I mean, potentially, in theory, it's a great thing. but the sociological effect of it, because prior to the internet, you needed to go out and find a scene. So somewhere like the West End of Glasgow, for example, it had a scene, and you would need to go out to a cafe and look at the billboards to find out what was going on. Oh, that band's playing, I know them. Oh, there's a fucking Dungeons and Dragons game or whatever you're into, a comic book convention, because people would put notices up. Oh, guitarist / searching for Axl. You know, oh, maybe I can sing like Axl Rose. I'll go and join that band. So people would need to go out and meet. And because of the internet, they do it online. And it's a bit, and it makes them, it's like junk food. It makes you think. Most people are overweight and malnourished in Western societies. They eat too much and they eat the wrong. They've not actually got the minerals that they need in their body to make their body function optimally. And it's like that with social media. It fills you up. It makes you think that your need for community is met, but the vacuum is still there and it's still making you depressed and anxious. And you think you don't need any help, because when you've not showered for a week, you forget that you stink. Well, you might not even stink. You forget how refreshing a shower is, and you think, oh, I don't need one. Then when you go in the shower, you're like, oh, thank God. Oh, wow, I need to shower every day. Showering is amazing. It's so refreshing. And that's good community. But see, people have gone without these close-knit ties, and dating apps have made it worse. If I wasn't a libertarian, I would be for the outright ban of dating apps, because it's so sociologically damaging. Everyone's a commodity. As soon as this generation is so fucking chicken shit, and I know, because I've had the benefit of in between relationships, dating girls a lot younger than me, and they as soon as there's any problems or an uncomfortable situation, it's just like, I just don't deal with that. People do not know the benefit of staying with the problem and working it through. This is a chicken shit, lazy ass society where, do you know what the mantra of this society is? The younger generation, for me, feels good is good, feels bad is bad. And that's it. If it feels good, it's good. And if it feels bad, it's bad. That's all there is to it. No need to think, no need to persist. And the internet made it worse. And these fucking 3-second, I think meme culture is amazing. I think there's an art to making a 1-minute video for TikTok that's really impactful. I'm not against these mediums. The constant gratification of seeing a notification, checking it, and then waiting for another one. Oh, my post only got 17 likes. It has absolutely fucked with people's ability to work through difficulties and delay gratification. And so, yeah, fuck it. There's no hope. Let's just all go. And yeah,
I want to say
anyway,
something else about community.
Please, I'd love it.
So it's funny, just as an anecdote. I've always been the sort of person who, if you need a large saucepan to cook a dinner, you go next door and say, "Hey, I haven't got a saucepan that's big enough. Have you got one?" And if they don't have one, going and trying another neighbor. And I sometimes now feel that when I propose that to people, oh, we haven't got this, let's just go and ask a neighbor. People will look at me.
Yeah, I know.
Why would you go and ask a neighbor that? Like, that's just, that's unbelievable. And the other day I bumped into a chap who I haven't seen for about 10 years. And I knew that he'd been on a really full-on journey during that time. And I really wanted to sit down with him and hear about what he'd been through. So we had this really wonderful connection. And during the course of it, we were talking about whether or not we wanted to see each other. We're realizing as we get older how much we need the company of other men. And and I was thinking, I've really been toying with this idea of, is it possible to have a men's group online? And we were both absolutely clear about the fact that we would not have had the same connection
I know.
had we been sitting as these divorced entities, these disembodied minds on a screen. We might be able to talk about some ideas like we are now and getting some real meaning from that. But in terms of the connection that we felt that day, it just would
It's
never
not the
quench that
same.
thirst fully. So that's where, when we have started talking about, is there a point in bringing together an online community? It's with the awareness that it's never going to fully quench that thirst for community and for human connection. It can be a wonderful thing to spend time in connection with people, even online, where you're sharing ideas, but it should never be seen as a substitute for the real connection that comes from living and breathing the same air as other people.
But perhaps if the focus is to bring forth people's material and work with it, then it will empower them to go out in the real world. If the online work is there to, like, I like the idea of meetup.com, where they said it has to be for in-person meetups, not online stuff until COVID, and then they reversed that. They would say, they would make you check a box to say that you absolutely intend to create. I love the idea. I want to just make one quick aside on the idea of atomization, because if I don't say it, it'll annoy me. It was one of the other points, like the internet. Those, well, status, I was going to say lefties, but statists in general, they used to say, people on the left would say, oh, look, capitalism has atomized society. And the ironic thing is, as with most of their claims, they completely misattribute the problem, and it's all their own policies that have done it. Because when the state takes over functions that used to be fulfilled by community, they remove the need for community. And so the lefties love the welfare state. It's the welfare state that caused atomization, because people don't need to know their neighbors so that they can go over and ask for a pint of milk or a saucepan, because their neighbor is now the government. A check in the mail from the government has replaced knowing your neighbors. And when they did that, they removed people's need for one another. People, and so, I had a cousin say something like, oh, your worldview encourages this like sort of radical, everyone to be individual instead of interdependent. I can't remember his exact words. And I thought, no, that's a caricaturish view of libertarianism. That's what people who don't understand libertarianism think about it. A libertarian society would be much more community orientated, because it would need to be, of necessity. It would have to be community orientated without the state. So I'm sorry to make it political. Everything is in some way political, but to bring it back to our day-to-day lives, what I mean is, in the same way that even if you don't use dating apps, you're affected by the fact that everyone else uses them, and now you've just put yourself at a disadvantage, because people's psychology has been shaped by dating apps, unfortunately. So you're still affected when you go out into the dating pool. And the same is true. Even if you don't collect a welfare check, you have to live in a society that has been atomized, because the state has come in and pretended that getting a check in the mail for housing benefit is the same as you being part of a network. So we can lay the grounds to help people engage appropriately with the world and try to establish community in their own life. I'm not really sure if an online community, because I keep on saying, oh, join my online community, join this, 100 people join, and it's the same 5 people who always post. And I think if it happens, it's like prayer. You know, it's like church was once spontaneously, people would come together, spontaneously burst into prayer, and they would have a moment of connection to the divine. It's like, if it happens, enjoy every moment of it, but it's kind of spontaneous. You can't necessarily plan for it.
So what I'm hearing you say is that ultimately one can't offer an online community. It's never going to be a community in the deepest sense of the word, but it's an online affiliation, and it's an online ground where one can explore and meet certain needs, but it's never going to fully, meet one's need for community. And I suppose with that understanding, it can still be of great benefit.
Yeah.
Also, I think one of the things that perhaps you and I are able to offer, due simply to our age and our interests, is a kind of we retain a memory of life pre-smartphone, pre-dating app, pre this apparent dawning of the virtual age. Before all of these utopian thoughts really have taken hold in the way that they have. When I suppose, having been through this process of hopefulness and hopelessness, I like to think that I can share with people who are still caught up in that cycle, like a view of a way out of it.
Right. And I guess that brings us to our event. So what I wanted to do was run a community event where we're offering you a lifeboat to sail the crazy seas of. And one thing I think is good about not saying we're offering an online community is, if we do this online event and it's really good, I know it will be. It's kind of like that, the meeting of the minds. Is once you're a community, it's a done deal. You're in it, whereas with this, if we do more than one event, if an event's so good, we do them regularly, we need to continually provide value, because it's a fleeting moment in which minds may meet and people may feel good together in affiliation.
I mean, a lifeboat is a powerful image. A ship is going down, and we could see that the ship of civilization is very much on the
Enlightenment
rocks.
has failed. Yeah,
and there's an opportunity to land on something that's never going to be able to provide sustenance in that long-term
in
way.
a long-term
It's
way.
just a vessel that is going to enable us to hold it together and survive until there's dry shores on which to land.
Yeah, until there's a real ship comes along and you can find your community there, and we can row together towards the real ship.
It's like it's an antidote to the atomization that so many are suffering.
So I guess we're going to have an online chat, and if you like these the concepts, you can discuss your own experience of the last however many years you want. It could be since COVID. We're going to get together and share our thoughts and ideas, and have a chance encounter in which good feelings of companionship can emerge.
I mean, it's funny because I feel like it needs to be described in the way that people, you can't describe what God is, you can only describe what it isn't. And in a way, it's like a therapy group that is not offering the opportunity to be healed. It's an act of communion with the others, which doesn't offer community. It's it's like, it's better described by what it isn't than what it is.
It's kind of like, well, I've not procreated myself, but from what I hear, having kids, you've got all these ideas of how you're going to shape them and who they're going to be, but it's going to be what it's going to be, because they've got their own little nature in there and their own personality. And I found that with all my best projects, I let go of the reins and they became what they become. So this is going to be end of August, beginning of September.
We've said Sunday the 1st of September is our
Sunday the 1st of September to have an online
get
group
together,
meet up. and discussion. And if you want to be part of that, I was thinking of putting up one of those cheesy pages where you go and you put your email in, and then we've got your email for an email list and email you all. I don't mind saying, if you want to be a part of it, email Ian, because it kind of weeds out people who can't be bothered. So, a lot of the internet stuff is about reach, do the thing that is going to make the most people click and join your mailing list. And like, for this, I don't care if 3 of you turn up or 6 or 20, I know it's going to be a great event, and we'll have a great time. So Ian, give them the email address to register their interest in joining the lifeboat.
You can contact me at Ian, that's IAN, Indigo Alpha. What is it for N?
Mike.
What is it?
No, I said Mike. Don't confuse
No,
them.
no, don't
Indigo,
confuse them.
Indigo Alpha.
November.
Oh man,
Indigo Alpha November.
That's right.
At iamacelebrant.uk.
Okay.
And that you don't have to say a lot. You can if you like. I will definitely respond.
Say land ho, or I want to join the lifeboat.
Exactly, and we'll send you a link, and you can join us for a discussion, and we can get to see who feels like a lifeboat is something that they're looking for right now.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on Be Yourself and Love It podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm glad. I like the fact that the topics are things that we've both thought of ourselves over the last years, and we came together and found that we had interesting, similar, or complementary outlooks on them.
I feel like you should mention the picture that's in the background, because I suppose that's an image that that we thought
that AI generate. I'm just going to take us off the stage so people can have a quick look at it. Sorry to those of you listening. That was my AI conception of the new Enlightenment.
Yeah, the digital Enlightenment.
The digital Enlightenment. So yeah, maybe it would be great to collect some of those thoughts in a booklet one day. But I think the good thing is the disillusionment of the digital Enlightenment leads to the realization that hope is misleading, and you need to live in the moment and bring your power to it, because who knows what's next moment's anyone's guess. I mean, they could tell you that you can't leave your house again. It's very hard to plan for the future these days. But if you give your all and everything to everything you do, just watch how spooky and magical it gets. Join the lifeboat and land ho.
Land ho will be manning the lifeboat. Look forward to seeing you there.
Guys at home, be yourself, but don't just be yourself. Be yourself and love it.